Brent Jarvis runs Performance Restorations in Mundelein, Illinois, a shop that does much more than just paint cars.
Some customers might want just a repaint on their Chevelle and put it back to stock. Other customers want complete body off restoration, and the majority of them now want the resto rod thing. Big wheels, big brakes, updated engines. They want to be able to drive the cars and have fun with them.
There was a lot going on at Brent's shop, but we were amazed by his '66 Corvette.
This car showcases what we're doing here at the shop right now. The car was involved in a bad wreck on 9/11, a couple hours before they blew up the trade centers. It was actually totaled out. It was really bad. So a decision was made with the car to have a lot of fun with it. Do something that we could enjoy rather than restore it back to a perfect stock vehicle, which is going to end up sitting in a bubble somewhere. This car has been radically customized. The frame's been radically customized. It utilizes C5 front suspension, C4 rear suspension, which has all been modified to fit under the body. These cars are much more narrow than the late model Corvettes. So a lot of fabrication, a lot of work had to be done to get the suspension under the car. And a real focus was on function. The car had to work. The understeer, the oversteer, the bump steer, the anti-dive characteristics of the braking. So there was a lot of engineering that went on into the suspension on the car. The engine, I went with a big block Chevy. It's an all aluminum Donovan block, 555 cubic inches, that uses Hillborn fuel injection. I wanted to have a look of an old road race car from the late 60s, early 70s. From the outside of the car, you see retro, you see customizing, candy paint, big block fuel injection, but underneath the car, it's all high tech and it's all serious business. We wanted to smooth everything out in the car and enhance the lines that GM put on these cars. These cars are really a beautiful car if you look at them, and they're really far ahead of their time. And still to this day, it's one of the most aerodynamic cars ever to come out of Detroit. So I just wanted to enhance the lines, smooth them out, and make it look more streamlined. So everything that was done is really subtle, but it was an awful lot of work. A Corvette purist could tell when they walk around the car what's been done. A lot of people scratch their head and can't figure out. They know something's been done. And that's when I know my job's been done right, that they can't figure it out. The fish gills are gone in the side of it. Everything I could do to smooth it out, I focused on, and I focused on making crisp body lines and making sure everything lined up nice, which is something that never even happened from the factory on these cars. These cars that a lot of builders are building now, the G machines, Pro Touring, whatever you want to call them, it's all about stance. They've got to sit down. The wheel and tire combination is really important. You want a little bit of a bigger tire diameter and width in the back. I purchased the biggest radial they make. It's a 345 3518 for the rear, and started there and then offset the front size a little bit. So getting it down is not that hard. Making the suspension still work is. The majority of the cars you see are lowered or using air ride suspension, and you can see it for a moment like that, but as soon as they drive down the street, they've got to raise it up. So again, it was the geometry. It has to work, it has to function, and it has to work at high speed, because this car is capable of some incredible speeds. Behind the motor, here's a modified Richmond 6-speed with a long shifter that goes through an aluminum drive shaft into the C4 rear end, which has been modified. It uses 4-inch billet aluminum half shafts. It's been narrowed a total of 10 inches, 5 inches on each side. And a lot of care was taken to make sure that the IRS would still articulate, would go up and down properly, so when you go around corners, it'll actually work right. It was a very difficult task. On the braking system, it's a unique system. We have the same size rotors and calipers all around. 13-inch drilled and slotted bare rotors. We use the stock Z06 calipers on the car with performance friction racing pads. What I do is use a softer pad in the front, a more aggressive, and a much harder pad in the back, and we reduce the line pressure to the rear to get the balance on the car. Most cars will use a small rotor and a small caliper in the back. And to me, when you look at the side of the car and you're looking through the wheels, especially if you use a big wheel in the back, it looks strange. The car looks like it's not proportioned with that little rotor and the big wheel. So that's why I went with the same size all around. We just had to do a little work to make it work right and balance itself out. It's an awesome braking system. It'll throw you through the window. In the interior, I wanted it to look really stock. They have a great looking interior in this Corvette, as do most of the muscle cars out there. And I think one of the biggest mistakes people make are completely customizing these interiors and changing everything that's been engineered in. The stock consoles, the stock gauge panels, those all look really great in these cars, so I preserved all that. It's all completely stock except for the racing seats and the 6-point harnesses, and it's all done in a custom-made tan leather. I had all the gauges reconditioned and calibrated, and that's actually what monitors the 800 horsepower engine, are the stock Corvette gauges, and they work great. They're large, they're easy to read, and they function properly. So when you look inside, it really doesn't look like a race car except for the shoulder harnesses and the 6-point roll bar. The Hilborn fuel injection uses a carabine ECU. Hilborn just started doing EFI a few years ago. The old school road racers know about the old Hilborn belt-driven pump setups, pouring gas down the injector stacks to get the engine started. Engines idling at 2,500 RPM. But from 4,000 to 7,000, there was nothing that could touch this setup. And the looks of them are awesome. With the EFI, it idles smooth at 1,000 RPM. We're talking about an engine that makes 800 horsepower with a 760 roller cam. I can't get a carbureted engine to do that. It's relatively easy to drive. It runs really smooth on the highway. If I wanted to, I could go cross-country in the car without an issue. It runs on 92 octane fuel. Now, we've had one road course outing with the car. It was a learning experience for me because I'm a drag racer. So I was learning to turn left and right with a 2,900 pound car that makes 800 horsepower. Unfortunately, I had a good instructor. We had a great time. We didn't put a single scratch in the car. By the end of the second day, I started to get into the gas and started to floor the throttle down the straightaway at Road America, which is a fairly long straightaway. We ran it out in 5th gear, almost all the way. We're doing about 175 on the straight. The car was still accelerating really, really hard, and I lifted off the gas at that point to slow it down easy for turn 1. Our focus is on this type of car. We're doing a lot of restoration work, but the demand is not out there for restoration work like it is for these types of cars because people want to drive them. I mean, let's think about it for a second. If you take your typical 4,000 pound muscle car with a 425 horsepower engine, 6-inch wide bias ply tires and drum brakes, this is not a good day. These cars go great in a straight line if you can hook them up, but forget about turning or stopping, and you better have 100 octane handy. You need to be able to drive the cars. People want to turn, stop, put pump gas in them, and have fun. So you have to do some work on them to get them there. I like to leave the cars, the body stock. I don't like to ruin the body lines on them. A few small changes, like the changes on this car, are okay. But really, the classic lines on these cars are timeless. It's a part of American history, American culture, and you don't want to mess it up too much.